The train's whistle pierced through the desert heat as it pulled away from the station, leaving Eleanor Whitmore standing alone on the wooden platform. Her leather trunk sat beside her feet, containing everything she owned in this world: 3 dresses, a silver brush that had belonged to her mother, and the divorce papers that bore her shame in neat, legal script. The sun blazed overhead, merciless in its intensity. Eleanor adjusted her bonnet with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes upon her. Though the platform was nearly empty, save for a drunk prospector snoring against a post and a mangy dog seeking shade beneath the water tower. At 28, she was neither young nor old, but something in between, a woman marked by failure in the only duty that mattered to society. "Ma'am?" The station master, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth, peered at her from beneath his cap. "You got folks meeting you here?" Eleanor straightened her spine, a gesture learned in the drawing rooms of Boston, where she'd once held her head high among the city's elite. "I'll be seeking employment in town." "Sir." His laugh was like gravel scraped across tin. "Employment? In Red Rock. Only employment for a woman here is at Miss Ruby's establishment. And, pardon my saying, but you don't look the type." Heat flooded her cheeks, but not from the Arizona sun. She knew what Miss Ruby's was, even in Boston. Whispers of such places reached proper ears. "I can cook, sew, and keep accounts. Surely someone needs—" "Nobody needs nothing from a woman traveling alone." His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Where's your husband?" The word struck her like a physical blow. James. Even now, she could see his cold gray eyes as he'd stood before the judge, listing her deficiencies as one might inventory damaged goods. Barren, worthless, a burden upon a man who deserved sons. "I am recently widowed," she lied, the words tasting of ash. The station master's expression softened marginally. "Well, there's a boarding house about 2 miles west, run by Widow Martinez. Might be she could use help, though I wouldn't count on charity in these parts." Eleanor hefted her trunk, surprised by how heavy it had become in the desert heat. Her corset, proper for Boston society, now felt like iron bands around her ribs. Each breath was a struggle as she began walking west, her button boots wholly unsuited for the rough dirt road that stretched endlessly before her. The landscape was alien, hostile, nothing like the manicured gardens and cobblestone streets she'd known. Saguaro cacti stood like ancient sentinels, their arms raised in surrender or supplication. The mountains in the distance shimmered with heat, purple and bronze in the afternoon light. Beautiful, perhaps, but beauty that could kill. Within an hour, her water flask was empty. Her throat burned with thirst, and her dress was soaked with perspiration. The trunk grew heavier with each step until she was dragging it more than carrying it, leaving a furrow in the sandy road. A rattling sound made her freeze. There, coiled beneath a mesquite bush, a snake watched her with glittering eyes. Eleanor's heart hammered as she carefully backed away, abandoning her trunk in her haste. The snake didn't pursue, but the message was clear. She didn't belong here. By sunset, she was lost. The road had forked twice, and in her delirium, she couldn't remember which path the station master had indicated. Her lips were cracked, her tongue swollen. The proper lady who had once hosted tea parties and played Mozart on the pianoforte was reduced to a stumbling wretch in the wilderness. When darkness fell, it brought new terrors. The temperature plummeted, and her sweat-soaked dress became a freezing shroud. Coyotes howled in the distance, their cries echoing off the canyon walls. Every shadow could hide a predator, human or animal. Eleanor collapsed beside a large boulder, drawing her knees to her chest. Above, stars blazed with an intensity she'd never seen through Boston's coal smoke. So many stars, and not one cared whether she lived or died. "Please," she whispered, though whether to God or the indifferent universe, she couldn't say. "I just wanted to disappear. I suppose this is one way to do it." Her family had made their position clear when James filed for divorce. Her father, a prominent banker, had sat behind his mahogany desk like a judge pronouncing sentence. "You have disgraced us. Eleanor, A woman who cannot provide her husband with children is no woman at all. I'll not have the Whitmore name dragged through further scandal. Her mother had wept, but they were tears of shame, not sympathy. Her sisters, both blessed with numerous offspring, had looked at her as one might regard a leper. The money her father gave her was not a gift but a payment. Take it and never return. Now, huddled against the rock, Eleanor laughed bitterly. They needn't have worried. The desert would solve their problem permanently. She didn't remember falling asleep, only waking to the sensation of being lifted. Strong arms carried her, and she smelled leather and smoke, felt the rhythm of a horse's gait. Her eyes fluttered open to see a face above her, angular features, skin bronzed by sun, black hair falling past his shoulders. An Indian, Apache. Her fevered mind supplied, remembering newspaper accounts of raids and massacres. Terror should have seized her, but she was too far gone. Death by Apache or death by desert, what difference did it make? She let consciousness slip away again, surrendering to whatever fate awaited. When next she woke, she lay on a bed of soft furs. A fire crackled nearby, and the scent of cooking meat made her stomach clench with hunger. She was inside some sort of dwelling, not a teepee as she might have imagined, but a sturdy structure of wood and adobe, built into the side of a cliff. The Apache sat across the fire, watching her with dark eyes that revealed nothing. He was perhaps 35, powerfully built, with scars marking his chest and arms. He wore deerskin leggings and a simple shirt, a knife at his belt. When he saw her watching, he filled a gourd with water and brought it to her. Eleanor drank greedily, the cool water like salvation on her parched throat. When she'd drained it, he filled it again, this time adding something from a leather pouch that made the water taste of herbs. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, but didn't speak. Instead, he returned to the fire and ladled something from a pot into a wooden bowl. The stew was unlike anything from her former life, gamey and seasoned with unfamiliar spices, but she ate ravenously. As her strength returned, so did her awareness of the situation. She was alone with a savage, miles from civilization. The stories she'd heard, but this man had saved her, fed her. His movements were careful, keeping distance between them as if he sensed her fear. When she finished eating, he spoke for the first time. "Sleep." His English was accented but clear. "Tomorrow, you choose." "Choose? Stay. Go. Choose." He banked the fire and moved to the far side of the dwelling, settling onto his own furs with his back to her. The gesture was oddly considerate, giving her privacy, showing he meant no threat. Eleanor lay back, staring at the firelight dancing on the ceiling. Outside, an owl called, and the wind sighed through the canyon. She was farther from her old life than miles could measure, saved by a man her society would call savage, yet who had shown her more kindness in an hour than she'd received in months. Tomorrow, she would choose. But tonight, for the first time since James had spoken those crushing words, "You have failed in your purpose as a wife," Eleanor slept without dreams of empty cradles and disappointed faces. The desert had stripped everything from her, even her tears. Perhaps that was its gift. In losing everything, she was free to choose what came next. The fire died to embers, and somewhere in the vast Arizona night, a wolf howled, lonely, defiant, and utterly wild. Dawn broke through the dwelling's entrance, painting the adobe walls in shades of gold and amber. Eleanor woke to find herself alone, the Apache's furs neatly folded where he had slept. Through the opening, she could see him crouched by a small stream, filling water gourds with practiced efficiency. She rose carefully, her body still weak but no longer on the edge of collapse. Her dress was torn and filthy, stained with sweat and desert dust. The proper Boston matron she had been would have been mortified. But that woman seemed like a stranger now. The Apache returned, setting the water gourds near the fire pit. He glanced at her briefly, then began preparing what appeared to be breakfast, some kind of flatbread cooking on a hot stone, and dried meat softened in warm water. "I should leave," Eleanor said, though the words felt hollow. "You've been kind, but I've imposed enough." He looked at her then, truly looked. And she saw something in his dark eyes that made her breath catch. Not desire or threat, but a deep understanding, as if he could see through her proper words to the truth beneath. "Where?" he asked simply. The question hung between them. Where indeed? The boarding house that might not accept her? The town where she'd be marked as a fallen woman the moment they learned she was divorced? Back to Boston and her family's scorn. "The nearest town," she said weakly. "I need to find work." 40 miles, he said, returning to his cooking. Through Apache land, through army patrols, through desert. He placed the bread on a wooden plate, added strips of meat. "You die." The blunt assessment should have frightened her, but instead, she felt oddly relieved. Here was truth without the polite veneers of society. "Then what do you suggest?" she asked. He shrugged. "Stay. Go. Choose. But choose with eyes open." They ate in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. When they finished, he stood and gestured for her to follow. Outside, the morning air was crisp, almost cold. The dwelling was built into a natural cave formation, expanded with adobe and timber. Below, a small spring fed a pool of clear water, surrounded by cottonwoods and willows, a secret oasis in the harsh landscape. "My home," he said simply. "It's beautiful." Eleanor breathed, and meant it. After the ornate mansions of Boston, this simple shelter felt more real, more honest. "You stay. You work," he said. "No guests here, only partners." Partners. Not servant, not woman for hire, but partner. The word settled into her chest like a warm stone. "What's your name?" she asked, realizing she didn't know this most basic thing about her rescuer. "White men call me Joseph," he said, mouth twisting slightly. "Apache name." He spoke something in his language, fluid and musical. Means lone wolf. Joseph is easier for your tongue. "I'm Eleanor," she said, "though I suppose that doesn't matter anymore." Names always matter. Joseph said seriously, "Eleanor, it is good name." Over the following days, they established a routine. Joseph was gone often, hunting or checking trap lines. Eleanor, determined to earn her keep, threw herself into maintaining the dwelling. She swept the floors with a broom made of bound grasses, learned to tend the fire, attempted to cook with the unfamiliar ingredients. Her first attempt at the flat bread was a disaster, burned on one side, raw on the other. Joseph ate it without complaint, though she caught the ghost of a smile when he thought she wasn't looking. "Tomorrow, I show you," he said. And he did. His hands, scarred from years of survival, were surprisingly gentle as he demonstrated how to mix the cornmeal with water, how to judge the stone's temperature, how to flip the bread at just the right moment. Standing beside him, Eleanor was acutely aware of his presence, the heat of his body, the quiet strength in his movements. "You've lived alone here for a long time," she observed one evening as they sat by the fire. Joseph's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 5 years. Why? The question slipped out before she could stop it. For a long moment, he stared into the flames. "Had wife, Apache woman, strong, like mountain cat, carried our child." His voice grew rough. "Soldiers came to our village, said we steal cattle. We didn't steal, didn't matter." Eleanor's heart constricted. She knew, without him saying, how the story ended. She run, but, he gestured to his leg, where an old scar ran from knee to ankle. "I was shot, could not protect, found her body 3 days later. The child—" "I'm sorry," Eleanor whispered, the words pathetically inadequate. "Your people say Apache are savage." Joseph continued, "May be true, but I never saw Apache kill woman with child, never saw Apache burn homes with families inside." The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared grief. Eleanor thought of her own loss, not through violence, but through the slow, crushing weight of failure. Month after month of hope turned to disappointment, until James's love curdled into resentment. "My husband divorced me," she said quietly, "because I couldn't give him children. 7 years we tried. 7 years of doctors and treatments and prayers. Nothing. Joseph turned to look at her. He fool. The simple statement, delivered with such certainty, broke something inside her. Tears came then, the first since she'd fled Boston. Joseph didn't move to comfort her. He simply sat witness to her grief, letting her cry without shame or judgment. One night, a violent thunderstorm rolled through the canyon. Lightning split the sky, and thunder echoed off the cliff walls like artillery fire. Eleanor, who had weathered many storms in Boston, found herself trembling. The raw power of nature here was different, primal, unrestrained. A particularly loud crack of thunder made her cry out before she could be embarrassed. Joseph was there, kneeling beside her sleeping furs. "Just storm," he said softly. "Cave is safe. Mountain protects." Another lightning flash illuminated his face, and Eleanor saw no mockery there, only concern. Without thinking, she reached out and grasped his hand. He stilled, looking down at their joined fingers. "I'm sorry." She began to pull away, but he gently held on. "Storm frightens you." "Everything here frightens me," she admitted. "The desert, the wildness, the freedom. I've been caged so long. I don't know how to be free." Joseph's thumb brushed across her knuckles, the touch sending warmth through her entire arm. Caged bird forgets how to fly, but wings remember, given time. They sat like that through the storm, hands linked, until the thunder moved on and only the rain remained, drumming steadily on the earth outside. When Joseph finally returned to his own furs, Eleanor felt the loss of his touch like a physical ache. The next morning brought awkwardness. They moved around each other carefully, avoiding eye contact. But as the day wore on, the strange tension eased. That evening, Joseph surprised her by producing a bundle wrapped in deerskin. "For you," he said gruffly. Inside was a dress, simple but well made, of soft doeskin decorated with modest beadwork, Apache clothing. She realized, sized to fit her. "I can't," she protested even as her hands smoothed over the buttery leather. "Cotton dress no good here," Joseph said pragmatically. "This better for desert, for work." She changed behind a blanket he strung up for privacy. The dress felt strange against her skin, foreign yet somehow right. When she emerged, Joseph's eyes widened slightly. "Good," he said, but his voice was rougher than usual. "You look like an Apache woman," she suggested, attempting levity. "Like Eleanor," he corrected. "Like yourself." That night, she helped him prepare dinner as usual, but something had shifted. When their hands brushed passing bowls, neither pulled away quite as quickly. When she laughed at his dry observation about a particularly stubborn rabbit that had evaded his snares, his rare smile lingered. "Joseph," she said as they settled by the fire, "what you said about choosing to stay or go, I choose to stay, if you'll have me." He was quiet for so long she feared she'd overstepped. Then, "Why?" Eleanor considered her words carefully. "Because here, I'm not the barren woman who failed her husband. I'm not the disappointment to my family. I'm just Eleanor. And that feels like enough." "Is enough," Joseph said firmly. "More than enough." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire die to embers. Outside, coyotes sang to the moon, and the desert wind whispered secrets through the canyon. Eleanor thought about the life she'd left behind. The proper dresses, the social calls, the endless performance of being a perfect wife. None of it seemed real anymore. What was real was this: the warmth of the fire, the solid presence of the man across from her, the way the stars looked through the dwelling's entrance. What was real was the way her hands had grown strong from work, the way she'd learned to read the desert's moods, the way Joseph's rare smiles made her heart race like a schoolgirl's. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saving me." Joseph shook his head. "Desert saved you, brought you here when ready. The desert nearly killed me," she pointed out. "Death and birth, sometimes same thing," he said. "Eleanor from Boston died in desert. Eleanor of the canyon lives." She pondered this as they prepared for sleep. Perhaps he was right. The woman who had stood on that train platform, clutching her shame like a shield, seemed like someone from another lifetime. This Eleanor, who cooked on hot stones and wore doeskin and felt her heart quicken at an Apache warrior's smile, was someone entirely new. As she settled into her furs, she heard Joseph's voice soft in the darkness. "I choose to. Choose you stay." Spring arrived in the canyon with a burst of color. Desert marigolds carpeted the slopes in gold, and the palo verde trees erupted in yellow blooms. Eleanor had been with Joseph for 3 months now, and the rhythm of their shared life had become as natural as breathing. She rose each morning before dawn, stoking the fire and preparing coffee, a luxury Joseph procured through mysterious channels she didn't question. He would return from his early hunt or trap-checking to find breakfast waiting, and they would eat together as the sun painted the canyon walls in shades of rose and amber. "You learned quick," Joseph remarked one morning, watching her flip cornbread with practiced ease. "No more burned offerings." Eleanor laughed, a sound that came easily now. "I had a good teacher." Their days fell into comfortable patterns. While Joseph hunted or worked his trap lines, Eleanor tended the dwelling, mended clothes with sinew and bone needles, and experimented with the native plants he taught her to identify. She learned which cacti produced edible fruit, which roots could be ground for flour, which herbs eased pain or fever. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and Joseph would teach her words in Apache. Her tongue struggled with the unfamiliar sounds, but he was patient, repeating phrases until she could approximate them. "What does that mean?" she asked one night after he'd spoken a particularly melodic phrase. A rare softness crossed his features. "The stars remember our stories." "That's beautiful. Apache believes stars hold memory of all who came before. When we die, our stories join theirs." He gestured to the brilliant canopy above. "My wife's story is there now. And the child who never drew breath." Eleanor's heart ached for him. Without thinking, she moved closer on the log they shared, until their shoulders touched. He didn't pull away. "Tell me about her," she said softly. Joseph was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, her name meant morning light, suited her. She waked before sun, always singing, hands always busy, weaving, cooking, making something beautiful from nothing. His voice grew thick. "Would have been good mother." "I'm sure she would have," Eleanor murmured. "You would be good mother too," Joseph said suddenly, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean—" "No," Eleanor said firmly, blinking back tears. "I wouldn't. That's been made very clear to me." Joseph turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense in the firelight. "White doctor's words are not truth. Apache know many truths about children coming or not coming. Sometimes body waits for right time, right spirit." "I'm 28 years old. Joseph, I tried for 7 years. There is no right time for me." He shook his head stubbornly. "You were cage bird then. Different now. Desert changes everything." They sat in charged silence, awareness crackling between them like the fire's sparks. Eleanor felt heat that had nothing to do with the flames, a yearning she'd thought herself too broken to feel again. One morning, Eleanor woke to find Joseph preparing for a longer journey. He packed dried meat, water, ammunition for his rifle, supplies for several days. "Big hunt," he explained. "Elk moving through mountains. Good meat for summer." "Be careful," she said, surprised by the anxiety that gripped her at the thought of his absence. He paused in his preparations, looking at her with an unreadable expression. Then he reached out and touched her cheek, the briefest whisper of contact. "I come back, always come back to you." The days without him passed slowly. Eleanor kept busy, but the dwelling felt empty, too quiet. She found herself listening for his footsteps, watching the canyon entrance for his familiar form. On the second night, she admitted what her heart already knew. Somewhere between that first bowl of stew and this moment, she had fallen in love with her Apache protector. The revelation terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. What future could there be for a disgraced Boston divorcee and an Apache warrior? Society would never accept them. But here in their hidden canyon, society's rules seemed as distant as the moon. On the third day, as afternoon shadows grew long, Eleanor was gathering herbs when she heard it, the distinctive rattle that made her blood freeze. The snake was coiled near the herb patch, thick-bodied and aggressive, its tail a blur of warning. She froze, remembering Joseph's lessons. Don't run, don't sudden move, back away slow. But fear locked her muscles, and the snake's head swayed, tasting her scent with its forked tongue. The shot came from nowhere, the snake's head exploding in a spray of blood. Eleanor spun to find Joseph lowering his rifle, his face a mask of barely controlled fear. "Eleanor!" He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, pulling her against his chest. She could feel his heart hammering, his arms trembling slightly as they wrapped around her. "I'm all right," she gasped against his shoulder. "I'm all right." He pulled back enough to examine her, hands running over her arms, checking for injury. "When I saw, if you had been, but I wasn't," she soothed, placing her hands over his. "You saved me, again." Their eyes met and held. Something shifted in the air between them, a line about to be crossed. Joseph's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "Eleanor," he said, her name a prayer on his lips. "Yes," she whispered, not even knowing what she was agreeing to, only that her whole being cried out for this moment. He kissed her then, gentle at first, as if she might break or flee. But Eleanor pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt, and gentleness gave way to hunger. 7 years of marriage had never made her feel what she felt in that moment, desired, cherished, alive. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Joseph rested his forehead against hers. "I should not," he said roughly. "You deserve—" "Stop," Eleanor commanded. "Don't tell me what I deserve. I know what I want." "What do you want?" "You," she said simply. "This life, this place, you." That night, they moved their sleeping furs together. Joseph held her as if she were precious, his hands reverent as they learned the landscape of her body. Eleanor discovered passion she hadn't known existed, her body responding to his touch like desert flowers to rain. Afterward, they lay entwined, sweat cooling on their skin. Joseph traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, and Eleanor felt a contentment she'd never known in her marriage bed. "Apache take only one wife," Joseph said quietly. "When morning light died, I thought that part of life was finished. Then you came, like the desert brought me to you." Eleanor murmured, remembering his words. "Maybe morning light sent you," he suggested. "She had generous heart, would want me not to be alone." Eleanor rose on her elbow to look at him. "Do you really believe that?" "I believe many things now I didn't believe before." His hand came up to tangle in her hair, which had grown wild and wavy in the desert air. "I believe white women can have Apache heart. I believe second chances come when we stop looking. I believe you were meant to find me." They made love again, slower this time, savoring each touch and sigh. When exhaustion finally claimed them, they slept deeply, truly together for the first time. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through the entrance and the smell of coffee brewing. Joseph sat by the fire, watching her with soft eyes. "Good morning," she said, suddenly shy despite their intimacy. "Best morning," he corrected, and his smile transformed his usually stoic features. As she rose to dress, Eleanor felt a twinge low in her belly. Her monthly time was approaching, that hated reminder of her failure. But for once, the thought didn't bring the usual wave of despair. Here with Joseph, she was complete as she was. They spent the day in quiet harmony, processing the elk Joseph had brought back. He showed her how to cut the meat for drying, how to scrape the hide for tanning. Their hands brushed often, and each touch sent warmth through her. That evening, as they sat by their fire, Joseph surprised her by speaking. In Apache way, when man takes woman as wife, he makes promise to her family. "I cannot promise your family, but I promise you." He took her hands in his. I promise to provide, to protect, to honor. I promise my strength when you are weak, my courage when you are afraid. I promise to see you always as you are now, whole, perfect, enough. Tears ran down Eleanor's face. I don't have Apache promises to give you. Then give me Eleanor promises, he said simply. She thought for a moment. I promise to stand beside you, not behind. I promise to learn your ways while honoring my own. I promise to build our life with my own hands, to face whatever comes without running. She squeezed his hands. I promise to love you as fiercely as the desert sun, as constantly as the canyon wind. Good promises, Joseph said thickly. They sealed their vows with a kiss, there under the vast star field that held all the stories of those who came before. Eleanor thought perhaps their story would join those stars one day. The tale of a broken white woman and a grieving Apache warrior who found each other in the wilderness and created their own world as they prepared for sleep in their shared furs. Joseph pulled her close and spoke softly in her ear. Eleanor, my wife. Joseph, my husband, she replied, and the words felt more true than any spoken in a Boston church. Outside, an owl called and was answered by its mate. The desert night wrapped around their dwelling like a blessing, and Eleanor fell asleep knowing that she had finally found her place in the world, not in society's cage, but in the wild freedom of a canyon, in the arms of a man who saw her truly, in a life she chose for herself. The stars wheeled overhead, keeping their eternal watch, holding their stories, and somewhere among them, Eleanor imagined, morning light smiled down on two wounded hearts learning to beat as one. Summer descended upon the canyon with blazing intensity. The days grew long and scorching, driving both Eleanor and Joseph to seek shade during the hottest hours. They had been together as husband and wife for 2 months now, their bond deepening with each passing day. It was during one of these sweltering afternoons that Eleanor first felt it, a strange flutter low in her belly. Different from any sensation she'd known before. She dismissed it as the heat, or perhaps something she'd eaten, but as the days passed, other signs became impossible to ignore. Her monthly bleeding, never regular but predictable enough, had not come. Her breasts felt tender, and certain smells, particularly the sage Joseph burned for ceremonies, made her queasy. She said nothing, afraid to voice the impossible hope. Too many times before. She'd thought perhaps, maybe, only to be crushed when her body betrayed her again. But this time felt different. Her entire being hummed with a vitality she'd never experienced. One evening, as she helped Joseph repair fishing nets by the stream, the truth became undeniable. She swayed suddenly, darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. Joseph caught her before she could fall, his face tight with concern. Eleanor, what is wrong? She gripped his arms, tears streaming down her face. Joseph, I think I'm with child. His hand stilled on her shoulders. You are certain? As certain as I can be. I've never felt this way before, never made it this far before. Her voice broke. I'm terrified. Joseph pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling her head. No fear, he murmured. Desert brought you to me for this. Our child grows strong, like mother. They held each other by the stream as twilight painted the canyon in purples and golds. Eleanor felt Joseph's hand drift to her still flat belly, his touch reverent. My son knew, he said quietly. When I promised you a child, he knew what white doctors did not. You needed to be free first, needed to be yourself. For the first week after her realization, they lived in a bubble of quiet joy. Joseph became even more protective, insisting she rest during the heat of the day, preparing special teas from herbs his mother had once used. Eleanor found herself talking to the tiny life within her. Promises and dreams whispered when she thought Joseph couldn't hear, but their paradise was not destined to last. They came on a morning when Joseph was checking distant trap lines. Eleanor was drawing water from the stream when she heard horses approaching, many horses, moving with military precision. Her heart seized as she recognized the blue uniforms of cavalry soldiers emerging from the canyon mouth. She stood frozen as they surrounded her, rifles at ready. The sergeant, a weathered man with cold gray eyes, dismounted and approached. Well, what have we here? His gaze took in her Apache dress, her sun-darkened skin, the dwelling carved into the cliff. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore. The name hit her like a physical blow. How do you— Your husband's been looking for you. Ma'am, posted rewards from here to California. Seems he's had second thoughts about the divorce. The sergeant's smile was predatory. Wants his wife back. Says she was taken by hostiles. That's a lie, Eleanor protested. I came here of my own will. I live here by choice. Living with savages? Another soldier spat tobacco juice near her feet. No white woman does that by choice. Where is he? The Apache buck who took you. No one took me, Eleanor said firmly, though her hands trembled. I am here because I choose to be. The sergeant laughed. Ma'am, you've clearly been out in the sun too long. Maybe the savage gave you something, confused your mind, but don't worry. We'll get you back to civilization, back to your rightful husband. I have a husband, Eleanor said desperately. Here, this is my home. The soldiers exchanged looks of disgust. Johnson, search the dwelling. Rest of you, fan out. The Apache can't be far. Please, Eleanor begged as men invaded the home she'd built with Joseph. Please, you don't understand. I understand plenty. The sergeant cut her off. You've been defiled by a savage, probably against your will. But Mr. Whitmore is a forgiving man. Says he'll take you back regardless of what unpleasantness you've endured. Eleanor's mind raced. James wanted her back? It made no sense, unless the inheritance. Her grandmother had left her a substantial sum. But under law, it belonged to her husband. The divorce would have severed his claim. Of course, it was never about her. Only money. Soldiers emerged from the dwelling carrying Joseph's weapons. Tools, the beautiful blanket his mother had woven. They tossed items carelessly, destroying in minutes what had taken months to build. Interesting setup, one reported. Looks like the savage has been living high, probably off goods stolen from settlers. Joseph doesn't steal, Eleanor said hotly. He trades fairly for everything. Joseph? The sergeant's eyebrows rose. You're on first-name basis with your captor. Before she could respond, a shout went up from the canyon entrance. Her heart sank as she saw Joseph being marched in at gunpoint, his hands bound, blood trickling from a cut on his temple. Their eyes met across the distance, and she saw him take in the scene. The soldiers, the destruction, her desperate face. His gaze dropped to her belly, and she saw understanding dawn. He'd figured out what she hadn't told the soldiers. That's him, the sergeant said with satisfaction. The one who kidnapped Mrs. Whitmore. He didn't kidnap me. Eleanor tried to run to Joseph, but was caught by rough hands. I love him. This is my husband. The soldier's laughter was ugly. Squaw man's confused her good, one muttered. Joseph spoke for the first time, his voice steady despite his circumstances. Let her go. She speaks truth. No force. No capture. Shut up, savage. A rifle butt to his stomach doubled him over. Stop! Eleanor screamed, fighting against the hands holding her. I'll go with you, just don't hurt him. The sergeant smiled. Now you're being sensible, though I'm afraid we can't just leave a hostile who's been keeping a white woman captive. I'll testify, Eleanor said desperately. In any court, I'll swear he never harmed me, never forced me. Please. Your testimony won't mean much. Ma'am, everyone knows captive women sometimes get confused, start sympathizing with their captors. The sergeant nodded to his men. Tie the savage to that cottonwood. We'll deal with him after we get Mrs. Whitmore packed up. As they dragged Joseph to the tree, he caught Eleanor's eyes again. In Apache, he said quickly. Be strong, little bird, little. Protect what grows within. I will find you. A soldier cuffed him for speaking his language, but the message was delivered. Eleanor pressed her hand to her belly, drawing strength from his words. They allowed her to pack a few belongings, not her Apache dress, deemed unseemly, but the worn remains of her original clothing. As she folded items with shaking hands, she slipped the small knife Joseph had given her into her boot. When she emerged, Joseph was tied to the tree, surrounded by soldiers taking turns taunting him. His face remained stoic, but she saw the rage burning in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. "I'm ready," she said quietly. Knowing resistance would only result in his death, they lifted her onto a horse, her hands bound to the saddle horn, for her own safety. As the column prepared to move out, the sergeant approached Joseph. "Here's what's going to happen. Savage, we're taking the lady back to her lawful husband. You're going to forget she ever existed. If we hear you've come within 50 miles of civilization, we'll hunt you down like the animal you are. Clear?" Joseph's gaze never left Eleanor's face. In clear English, loud enough for all to hear, he said, "She carries my child. You take 2 lives, not 1. The statement hit like thunder. Soldiers cursed and muttered. The sergeant's face went purple with rage. "Lying, savage!" "It's true," Eleanor said, lifting her chin. "I carry his child, and I go with you only to save his life. But know this, I will never be James Whitmore's wife again. I belong to Joseph, before God and nature." The sergeant looked like he wanted to shoot them both, but orders were orders. "Gag him," he commanded. "Let him watch his white whore right away." As they stuffed cloth in Joseph's mouth, Eleanor held his gaze, trying to pour all her love, all her promise to survive, into that look. His eyes answered with equal intensity. "Wait for me," they said. "I will come." The column moved out, leaving Joseph tied to the tree. Eleanor didn't look back, couldn't, or her resolve would shatter. But she felt his eyes on her until the canyon turned and hid him from view. Inside her, their child fluttered like butterfly wings, as if sensing the distress. Eleanor placed her bound hands on her belly as best she could. "Be strong, little one," she whispered in Apache. "Your father will come for us, and if he cannot, I will find a way back to him. This is not the end of our story." The sergeant rode beside her, face grim. "Mr. Whitmore won't be pleased about your condition, but he's paid good money to get you back. I'm sure he'll figure out what to do with you." Eleanor straightened her spine, calling on the strength the desert had forged in her. They could take her body back to civilization, but her spirit would remain in the canyon with Joseph. And somehow, some way, she would return to him. The sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly as they rode toward the world she'd fled. But Eleanor no longer feared the desert sun. She had survived it once. She would survive this too, behind them. Unknown to the soldiers, a lone Apache warrior worked at his bonds with patient determination, the memory of his woman's courage giving him strength. The cottonwood's bark was rough, the ropes tight, but Joseph had escaped worse. His wife carried his child. His family needed him, and nothing, not soldiers, not distance, not the whole United States Army, would keep him from them. The town of Cedar Ridge sprawled before them like a wound on the desert floor. After 3 days of hard riding, Eleanor barely recognized the place she'd passed through months ago. It seemed smaller, meaner, its wooden buildings like cage bars against the endless sky. They delivered her not to James, who apparently awaited her in Denver, but to the town's church, where Reverend Marcus Bright and his committee of proper Christian women had prepared to receive the rescued captive. Poor dear, Mrs. Constance Bright, the Reverend's wife, clucked as Eleanor was brought into the vestry. "What horrors you must have endured, but you're safe now. We'll cleanse you of that heathen's influence." Eleanor stood silently as they stripped her of her remaining dignity, burning the clothes that smelled of sage and Joseph, forcing her into a proper dress that hung loose on her desert-hardened frame. The corset they tried to force on her made her retch. "I'm with child," she said flatly. "The corset will harm the baby." The women recoiled as if she'd spoken blasphemy. "Mrs." Bright's face went white, then red with righteous anger. "That savage's spawn," she hissed. "Growing inside a Christian woman. It's an abomination." "The child is innocent," Eleanor said. her hand protective over her belly. "No child of rape can be innocent," Reverend Bright intoned from the doorway. "But God is merciful. There are ways to correct such situations." Eleanor's blood went cold. "You mean to murder my child?" "Murder? Mrs." Bright looked affronted. "We speak of removing a heathen's curse, Doctor. Morrison has methods, a tonic that brings on the monthly bleeding. You'll be cleansed, and your husband need never know the full extent of your defilement." "I will not." Eleanor's voice rang with steel. "This child was conceived in love, in marriage." "Marriage?" The Reverend's laugh was harsh. "A Christian woman cannot be married to a savage. Whatever pagan ritual he forced on you holds no weight in God's eyes." They locked her in a small room behind the church, for her own protection, while they debated her fate. The window was barred. The door, solid oak. A narrow cot and chamber pot were the only furnishings. Eleanor sank onto the cot, hands cradling her belly. "Stay strong, little one," she whispered in Apache. "Your father will come." But doubt crept in as days passed. How could Joseph find her here? Even if he escaped his bonds, the soldiers would shoot him on sight if he approached the town. And her pregnancy advanced each day. Soon, they would force their cure upon her. Mrs. Bright visited daily, accompanied by other righteous women who spoke of Christian duty and the shame Eleanor had brought upon her race. They told her James was traveling from Denver, eager to reclaim his property, for that's what she was. Property passed from man to man. "He's willing to forgive your time among the savages," Mrs. Bright informed her one morning. "But not if you insist on keeping that creature's child. Be reasonable. Eleanor, take the tonic. Return to your proper life." "I would rather die," Eleanor said simply. The women exchanged glances. "That can be arranged," one muttered, though Mrs. Bright shushed her. "Doctor." Morrison came that afternoon, a thin man with cold hands and colder eyes. He examined Eleanor with clinical detachment while she fought not to vomit from his touch. "About 3 months along," he announced. "The tonic would be most effective now. Wait much longer, and the process becomes complicated." "I refuse," Eleanor said again. The doctor shrugged. "The law gives husbands certain rights over their wives' persons. When Mr. Whitmore arrives, he can authorize the procedure regardless of your wishes." Desperation clawed at Eleanor's throat. That night, she tested every board, every bar, seeking weakness. The knife hidden in her boot was too small for the door, but perhaps... On the 4th night, young Mary Turner brought her dinner tray. Mary was barely 16, pressed into service at the church after her own fall from grace, pregnant by a traveling salesman who'd promised marriage. "Please," Eleanor whispered as Mary set down the tray. "You understand. You know what it's like to carry a child they call shameful." Mary's eyes darted nervously. "I can't help you. They'd cast me out." "They'll take my baby," Eleanor pressed. "Kill it before it can draw breath. Could you stand by and let that happen?" Mary's hand went to her own swollen belly. I don't... Just leave the door unlatched. Just once. I'll wait until deep night. They'll never know it was you." For a long moment, Mary stared at her. Then, without a word, she left. Eleanor heard the lock click, but not the second turn that would fully secure it. Eleanor waited until the church bells chimed midnight. Carefully, she pushed the door. It opened, heart hammering. She crept through the dark church, every creak of wood making her freeze. The main door was barred from inside, but she remembered a side entrance the choir used. The night air hit her like freedom itself. She oriented herself by the stars Joseph had taught her to read and began walking. Not toward the canyon, they'd expect that. Instead, she headed for the Mexican Quarter, where questions were fewer and brown skin common. She found shelter with an old curandera named Rosa, trading her mother's silver brush for a week's lodging in silence. Rosa asked no questions, only looked at Eleanor's belly with knowing eyes. "Apache?" she asked simply. Eleanor nodded. "They make strong babies," Rosa said. You rest. Building life is hard work. For 3 days, Eleanor hid while the town searched. She heard the church bells ringing alarm, saw riders heading out in all directions, but the Mexican quarter kept its secrets. On the 4th night, Rosa woke her urgently. Someone comes, says he looks for the woman who speaks Apache words to her belly. Eleanor's heart leaped. Joseph. But it wasn't Joseph who entered. It was Sam McGraw, the old trader who supplied goods to both Apache and white settlements. His weathered face was grave. Your man sent me, he said without preamble. Had to wait until the search parties gave up. He's holed up in the mountains, hurt but alive. Soldiers nearly killed him, but Apache are hard to kill. Take me to him, Eleanor begged. Sam shook his head. Can't move him yet, but he sent this. He produced a small leather pouch. Inside was a turquoise stone wrapped in silver wire. Apache craftsmanship. Said you'd know its meaning. Eleanor pressed the stone to her lips. It was Joseph's mother's. He'd shown it to her once. Said it would belong to his wife when he took one again. It was proof he lived, proof he still claimed her. What should I do? She asked. Stay hidden. Let your man heal. When he's ready, I'll come for you. Sam's eyes were kind. That baby you're carrying, it's got a warrior father and a warrior mother. It'll need both to survive what's coming, but time was running out. The next morning, Rosa reported that James Whitmore had arrived in town. Furious at Eleanor's escape, the sheriff was now involved, and a federal marshal had been summoned. They say you're mad, Rosa told her. Say the Apache did things to your mind. Your husband, he signs papers, says you're not, how you say, competent, need to be locked away for your own good. An asylum. Eleanor had heard of such places, where inconvenient wives could be disposed of legally. Once there, she'd never leave. And the baby. That night, the cramps began. Light at first, then stronger. Eleanor woke Rosa in panic. No, she gasped. It's too early. I can't lose this baby. Rosa examined her with gentle hands. Not losing, but baby wants to come. Stress, fear, running. Body thinks it's time. It's too soon. Apache babies are strong, Rosa said firmly. You rest. No pushing yet. We convince baby to wait. For 2 days, Eleanor fought her own body, willing her child to stay safe inside. Rosa brewed teas, spoke soft Spanish prayers, but the contractions continued. Eleanor gripped the turquoise stone and spoke to her baby in Apache, in English, in the wordless language of a mother's love. On the 3rd night, Sam McGraw returned. His face was grim. They're coming, he said. Dawn raid. Someone talked. I can't travel, Rosa protested. She's in labor, Sam cursed. Joseph's coming down from the mountains. Half-healed or not, he won't let them take her again. There'll be bloodshed. No, Eleanor gasped between contractions. He can't. They'll kill him. Try stopping an Apache protecting his family, Sam said. He'll die before he lets them have you. Eleanor struggled upright, decision crystallizing through the pain. Then we go to him, now. You can't. I can. I will. She stood, swaying but determined. My child will be born free. Not in a cage, not in an asylum. Free. Rosa and Sam exchanged glances. Then Rosa nodded. I get my wagon. We go. They bundled Eleanor into the back of Rosa's herb wagon, hidden among bundles of dried plants. Each bump of the wheels sent agony through her, but she bit down on leather to muffle her cries. The contractions were regular now, powerful. Her body had decided. This baby was coming. They cleared the town as dawn approached, heading for the mountains where Joseph waited. Eleanor couldn't see the sky, but she felt the air change, tasted freedom on each breath. Then she heard it. Horses approaching fast. Many horses. They found us, Sam cursed. Eleanor gripped the wagon's side as another contraction tore through her. She couldn't run, couldn't fight, but she could choose. Stop the wagon, she commanded. What? Stop! When the wagon halted, Eleanor climbed out. Standing unsteadily in the road, the posse was visible now. James at its head beside the sheriff. But there, emerging from the rocks like a shadow made flesh, was Joseph. Her Apache warrior, thinner than before, moving stiffly from his injuries, but alive and coming for her. Their eyes met across the distance. Eleanor felt the next contraction building and knew their child would be born here, between worlds, under the vast sky that had witnessed their love. "Joseph," she called, his name both greeting and farewell, not knowing which this moment would bring. The posse thundered closer. Joseph moved toward her, and Eleanor stood between them, her body preparing to bring forth life while death closed in from both sides. The turquoise stone was warm in her hand, and the baby moved within her, strong despite everything. Whatever came next, she had kept her promise. She had protected their child. Now she could only hope the desert that had brought them together would somehow save them once more. The standoff lasted only moments before chaos erupted. Joseph reached Eleanor just as the first gunshot cracked through the dawn air. He pulled her behind Rosa's wagon, shielding her body with his own as bullets splintered wood above their heads. "You should not have come," Eleanor gasped, another contraction seizing her. "Where else would I be?" Joseph's hand found hers, squeezing tight. "My place is with you." James Whitmore's voice carried across the distance, high with fury. "Surrender my wife, savage. She's mine by law." "She belongs to no man," Joseph called back. "She chose her path." The sheriff tried to restore order. "Nobody needs to die here. Mrs. Whitmore, come out peacefully. Your husband's willing to get you proper medical care." Eleanor's bitter laugh turned into a groan of pain. "Medical care? They mean to kill our child." Sam McGraw had taken position behind a boulder, his old rifle trained on the posse. "We're outnumbered 5-1, he muttered. "Apache have fought worse odds," Joseph said, checking his weapons. But Eleanor saw the truth. He was still weak from his injuries. They had little ammunition, and she was in no condition to run. Then Rosa did something unexpected. The old curandera stood up, hands raised, and walked toward the posse. Bullets stopped flying as men hesitated to shoot an unarmed elderly woman. "The woman is in labor," Rosa announced in accented English. "You want to kill mother and baby? In sight of God?" Some of the townsmen shifted uncomfortably. These were church-going folk, whatever their other faults. "She can have the baby in custody," James declared. "Then we'll deal with it appropriately." "Deal with it?" Eleanor struggled to her feet despite Joseph's protests. "You mean murder it, as you tried to murder my spirit all those years?" She stood in full view now, one hand on her swollen belly, the other gripping Joseph's arm. "Yes, I carry an Apache child, a child conceived in love, in true marriage. And I would rather die here, under God's sky, than let you touch either of us." "Eleanor, please." James dismounted, approaching slowly. "You're not well. This savage has corrupted your mind. But I forgive you. Come home, and we'll fix everything." "Fix?" Eleanor's voice rose. "Like you tried to fix me for 7 years? Like I was broken goods because my womb wouldn't quicken to your cold touch?" James's face flushed. "You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying." Another contraction hit, and she couldn't suppress a cry. Joseph's arm went around her waist, supporting her. "I was dying in your world, James, withering like a plant without sun. This man," she looked up at Joseph, "he brought me back to life, and now I carry life within me. The miracle you said I'd never have." "Enough!" The sheriff stepped forward. "By the authority vested in me, I order you to surrender, Joseph Crow Dog, for the kidnapping and defilement of a white woman." Joseph tensed, and Eleanor knew he was calculating. Could he get her to safety before they cut him down? But salvation came from an unexpected source. Thundering hooves announced new arrivals, not more townsmen, but a band of Apache warriors, led by Joseph's cousin, Marcus Crow Dog. "Heard my cousin might need help," Marcus called out, his English heavily accented but clear. 20 Apache fighters spread out among the rocks, weapons trained on the posse. The balance had shifted. Now it was the townsmen who were outnumbered. "This is federal business," the sheriff warned. You interfere, the army will come. Army always comes. Marcus shrugged. We still here? In the tense silence, Eleanor felt a rush of warmth between her legs. Her water had broken. Joseph, she whispered urgently. He looked down, saw the spreading wetness, and his face went tight with concern. Without hesitation, he swept her up in his arms. My wife needs help, he announced. We go. Anyone tries to stop us, there will be blood. You can't just... James started forward, but found himself staring down the barrel of Sam's rifle. I'd stay real still if I were you, Sam advised. Joseph carried Eleanor to a sheltered spot among the rocks, Rosa hurrying after with her supplies. The contractions were coming fast now, the baby insistent. Can't, not here, Eleanor panted. Yes, here, Joseph said firmly. Under the sky, between worlds, good place for our child to enter. As Rosa prepared, coached by Joseph in the Apache way of birthing, the standoff continued. Eleanor could hear James arguing with the sheriff, demanding action, but attacking meant starting a battle they might not win. Then nature took over, and Eleanor forgot everything but the ancient rhythm of birth. Joseph knelt beside her, letting her grip his hands as the pain crashed over her in waves. Rosa worked with calm efficiency, while Apache women who'd accompanied the war party formed a protective circle. I see the head, Rosa announced. Dark hair, like father. Eleanor bore down with strength she didn't know she possessed. The sun climbed higher, painting the rocks gold and red. Between pushes, she looked into Joseph's eyes and saw her own fierce love reflected there. Almost, he murmured. You are strongest woman I know. One final push, a searing sensation, and then a cry. Thin, angry, but unmistakably alive. A son, Rosa declared, placing the wet, squirming infant on Eleanor's chest. Small, but perfect. Eleanor sobbed as tiny fingers gripped hers. The baby's skin was lighter than Joseph's, but darker than hers, a perfect blend of two worlds. His eyes, when they fluttered open, were dark like his father's. He lives, she whispered. Our son lives. Joseph touched the baby's head with trembling fingers. What the desert brings together, no man can separate. The baby's cries had carried to the posse. Eleanor heard James curse, the sound of horses milling. Their child was real now, undeniably alive. Harder to murder what everyone had heard draw breath. Marcus appeared at the rock's edge. Cousin, we should move. More whites will come. But it was the sheriff who approached, hands raised in peace. He was an older man, had probably seen too much bloodshed in his years. Ma'am, he called. Is the child? Is it healthy? Yes, Eleanor called back, her voice strong despite exhaustion. My son is perfect. The sheriff sighed deeply. Mr. Whitmore, I've got to tell you, pursuing this further means war. Dead women and babies. That what you want on your conscience? She's my wife, James protested. Was your wife, the sheriff corrected. Any fool can see she's chosen different. And frankly, after what I've heard today, I'm not inclined to force her. He raised his voice. I'm calling this done, Mrs. Excuse me, what did you say your Apache name was? Joseph answered for her. Her name is Dawn Singer, for she sang to the dawn when I first loved her. Mrs. Dawn Singer has made her choice clear. The child is born and breathes, as far as I'm concerned. This is tribal business now. You can't do this, James spluttered. Watch me. The sheriff turned his horse. Any man wants to stay and fight the Apache over a woman who clearly don't want him. That's his choice. But it ain't the law's fight anymore. One by one, the posse members turned away. Some muttered about Christian duty, but none wanted to die for James Whitmore's pride. Finally, only James remained, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. This isn't over, he called to Eleanor. You're still legally mine. That half-breed bastard doesn't change that. Eleanor found strength in anger. Then I'll remain in Apache lands forever. Try to claim me here. Joseph stood, hand on his knife. You heard my wife. Go. Don't come back. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then James wheeled his horse and galloped after the others, but not before shouting, "You'll regret this, both of you!" As the dust settled, Eleanor looked down at her nursing son. He'd found her breast with instinctive hunger, and the sensation was unlike anything she'd experienced. Pain and pleasure and fierce protectiveness all mingled. "He needs a name?" she said softly. Joseph considered. "Born between worlds, under fire, bringing peace. Samuel, for your people. Kohana for mine, means swift." "Samuel Kohana Crow Dog." Eleanor tested the name. "Yes." Rosa finished tending to Eleanor, then stood with a satisfied nod. Mother and child, both strong. Desert blessed this birth. The Apache women ululated in celebration, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. Marcus clasped Joseph's shoulder. "Come back to the band," he urged. "Safer together." Joseph looked to Eleanor, leaving the choice to her. She thought of the solitary canyon home they'd built, now certainly destroyed by the soldiers. But she also thought of community, of other mothers to learn from, of Samuel growing up with children who wouldn't scorn his mixed blood. Yes, she decided. We go with family. They fashioned a travois for her and Samuel, cushioned with blankets. As the band prepared to move deeper into Apache territory, Eleanor looked back once at the road to town, to civilization, to her old life. She felt nothing but relief to be leaving it behind. Joseph walked beside the travois, one hand resting protectively on his son's tiny form. "You kept your promise," he said quietly. "Protected our child against all who would harm him." "We both kept our promises," Eleanor corrected. "You said you'd give me a child, and here he is." Samuel made a small sound, not quite cry, not quite coo. His parents looked down at him, then at each other, and smiled. The sun was high now, the desert heat building, but Eleanor had never felt more alive. They were going home, not to any building, but to the life they'd chosen, the family they'd made, the future they'd fight to protect. Together. Behind them. Dust devils danced where the confrontation had taken place, erasing tracks and memories alike. Ahead, the mountains rose blue and eternal, holding their secrets close. And somewhere between, a woman who'd been told she was barren sang softly to her newborn son in a mixture of English and Apache, while his warrior father kept watch, and the desert blessed them all with its vast, indifferent grace. The Apache camp nestled in a hidden valley, protected by towering red cliffs and accessible only through narrow passes that could be defended by a handful of warriors. Eleanor marveled at the organized chaos wiki-ups arranged in family groups, children running between them, women working hides and preparing food, men crafting weapons and tending horses. Their arrival caused a stir. Many had heard of Joseph's white woman, but seeing her was different. Some faces showed curiosity, others suspicion, a few outright hostility. Eleanor held Samuel closer, acutely aware of her pale skin and the infant who bridged two worlds, Marcus's wife. Sarah approached first. She was a sturdy woman with kind eyes who'd borne 6 children of her own. "Come," she said simply. "You need rest and proper care after birthing." The wiki-up Sarah led them to was well-constructed, warm and dry. As Eleanor settled onto soft furs with Samuel at her breast, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She'd been running on pure will for so long. "Sleep," Joseph urged. "I guard," but sleep brought no peace. Samuel woke crying every few hours, and Eleanor discovered what Joseph had warned might happen. Her body, stressed and malnourished from the ordeal, struggled to produce enough milk. The baby's cries grew weaker, more pitiful. By the second night, panic gripped her. "He's dying," she whispered to Joseph, tears streaming. "I can't feed him properly. My body is failing him just like it failed to conceive all those years." Joseph fetched Sarah, who examined the baby with experienced hands. Her face was grave. "Baby needs more than you can give right now, but there is a way." She returned with another woman, Maria, whose own infant had died days before. Maria's face was etched with grief, but when she saw Samuel's weakened state, compassion overcame her sorrow. "I have milk, but no baby," Maria said softly. You have baby, but struggle with milk, perhaps. Eleanor understood. In Boston, wet nurses were common among the wealthy, though hidden behind closed doors. But this felt different, more intimate, more generous. Please, Eleanor said simply. Help my son. Maria took Samuel gently, and he latched onto her breast with desperate hunger. As he fed, color returned to his tiny features. Eleanor wept with relief and gratitude, while Maria's own tears fell silently, grief and healing mingled. This arrangement continued for days. Eleanor's milk slowly increased, but Maria supplemented, ensuring Samuel thrived. The two women formed an unexpected bond, united by motherhood's fierce love, but not everyone welcomed the new additions. Thomas Crow Dog, Marcus's younger brother, made his displeasure known. He'd lost his wife to white soldiers, and Eleanor's presence reopened wounds that had never properly healed. She brings danger, Thomas argued at a council meeting. Soldiers will come looking. Her white husband won't give up. Joseph is my cousin, Marcus replied firmly. His family is our family. His Apache family died because of whites. Thomas shot back. Now he brings another white woman among us. Eleanor, listening from the wickiup, felt each word like a blade. Joseph found her there, curled around Samuel, shaking. Maybe we should leave, she whispered. I don't want to bring harm to your people. Our people. Joseph corrected. You are Apache now, in all ways that matter. But that night, Samuel developed a fever. His tiny body burned, and his cries became weak mewls. Eleanor was beside herself. While Joseph maintained stoic calm that didn't reach his eyes, the band's medicine woman, Ancient Yellowbird, was summoned. She studied the infant, then looked hard at Eleanor. Baby caught between worlds. Mother's fear makes him weak. I'm not afraid, Eleanor protested. Body not afraid. Spirit afraid. You hold one foot in each world, so child doesn't know where he belongs. Yellowbird began preparing herbs. Choose, white woman. Be Apache mother or be nothing. The medicine was bitter. The treatment harsh. Yellowbird instructed Eleanor to strip naked despite the cold, to hold Samuel skin to skin while she chanted in the old language. Smoke from sacred herbs filled the wickiup until Eleanor's eyes streamed. Through the long night, as Samuel's fever raged, Eleanor found herself praying, not to the Christian God of her childhood, but to whatever spirits watched over this harsh land. She promised them anything if they'd spare her son. Joseph sat behind her, his body supporting hers, his voice joining the chants. At some point, Maria entered and took her place on Eleanor's other side, adding her voice and her strength. As dawn broke, Samuel's fever broke with it. His cry was strong again, demanding. Eleanor sobbed with relief as he nursed hungrily. Yellowbird nodded with satisfaction. Now he knows he belongs here, with Mother who chose to be Apache. Word of the night's vigil spread through camp. Something had shifted. Eleanor had passed a test she hadn't known she was taking. Women who'd held themselves apart now brought small gifts. Beaded moccasins for Samuel. Dried meat for Eleanor. Herbs for strength. Even Thomas came, standing awkwardly at their wickiup entrance. The child is strong, he admitted grudgingly. Has his father's spirit. As Samuel grew stronger, thriving on the combined care of Eleanor and Maria, life settled into new rhythms. Eleanor learned to tan hides properly, to identify edible plants, to cook Apache dishes that Joseph favored. Her hands, once soft from leisure, became tough and capable. She also learned the unspoken rules of camp life, which families allied with which, whose husband had straying eyes, which children might play with Samuel when he was older. The women's work circle became her classroom in Apache ways. Your Apache improves, Sarah noted one day as Eleanor correctly used a complex verb form. I have a good teacher, Eleanor replied, glancing at Joseph, who was showing young boys how to string bows. But their peace was shattered when scouts reported army patrols increasing, searching for renegade Apache harboring a kidnapped white woman. James hadn't given up after all. The band held council. Some advocated moving deeper into Mexico, others for standing and fighting. Eleanor listened to the debates with growing dread. "This is because of me," she said when allowed to speak. "I won't have deaths on my conscience. Joseph and I should leave, draw them away." "And go where?" Marcus asked practically. "A white woman and Apache man with mixed baby. Where is safe?" It was Sam McGraw, arriving with his trading goods, who provided an unexpected solution. "There's a settlement 2 days west. Mixed folk, Mexican, Apache, some whites who married into tribes, even a few colored folks who came west after the war. Law doesn't much care about it, long as everyone keeps quiet." "We'd be welcome there?" Eleanor asked. "Well, welcome might be strong, but you'd be left alone. Folk there understand choosing your own path." Joseph and Eleanor exchanged looks. It wasn't the Apache way he'd grown up with, or the white society she'd fled. But perhaps that's what Samuel needed. A place between worlds, where mixed blood wasn't a curse, but simply another way of being. The decision was made harder when Samuel spoke his first clear word, not mama or papa, but Maria, reaching for his milk mother. The three adults laughed through their tears, bound together by love for this small life. "You come too," Eleanor urged Maria. "Samuel needs you." But Maria shook her head. "My place is here, but you take my blessing," and she removed a small turquoise amulet from around her neck. "This for Samuel, so he remembers his Apache mother." They left at dawn 3 days later, supplied by the band with everything needed for a new start. The parting was harder than Eleanor expected. These people who'd been strangers had become family. Thomas surprised everyone by approaching with a gift, a cradle board he'd carved himself. "For the child," he said gruffly. "Maybe he grows up to bridge worlds better than we did." Yellowbird gave Eleanor a medicine bundle. "You'll birth more children," she said with certainty. "This helps when the time comes." Eleanor started to protest that she couldn't, that Samuel was her miracle, but the old woman's knowing look silenced her. As they rode out, Samuel secure in his new cradleboard on Eleanor's back. She looked back at the camp one last time. Maria stood watching, hand raised in farewell. Eleanor touched the turquoise at Samuel's neck and whispered a promise to honor all the mothers who'd helped him live. The journey to the mixed settlement took 3 days through rough country. Samuel traveled well, seeming to enjoy the movement and changing scenery. At night, the family of 3 slept under stars, and Eleanor reflected on how far she'd come from Boston's drawing rooms. "Do you regret?" Joseph asked one evening as Samuel slept between them. "Regret what?" "The life you could have had. Comfort, safety, acceptance." Eleanor traced their son's features, his father's strong nose, her stubborn chin, skin that belonged to neither and both. "I had that life. It was killing me slowly, this life." She gestured to the vast starfield, to Joseph, to Samuel. "This life makes me feel alive." Joseph smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious features. "Good, because tomorrow we start again. New place, new challenges. Together," Eleanor said firmly. "Together," he agreed, as if understanding. Samuel stirred and made a contented sound. Eleanor sang softly, an Apache lullaby Maria had taught her, mixed with an English hymn from her childhood. 2 traditions, 2 languages, woven into something new. That's what they were building. She realized, not Apache life or white life, but their life, Samuel's life, a future written in neither tradition but borrowing from both. The stars wheeled overhead, constant and eternal, and beneath them, a family that shouldn't exist by any society's rules slept peacefully, protected by love stronger than any law or prejudice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were whole, they were together, and they were free. The settlement of Esperanza lived up to its name, Hope. Nestled in a valley where 3 territories met, it existed in a legal gray area that suited its mixed population perfectly. Adobe houses clustered around a central well, with small farms spreading into the surrounding fertile land. Joseph, Eleanor, and Samuel were met by Miguel Santos, the unofficial mayor, a former vaquero, who'd married an Apache woman and understood the delicate balance of mixed families. "Welcome," Miguel said simply, eyeing their small family with knowing acceptance. "House at the end there is empty. Previous family moved on to California. It's yours if you can fix the roof." The abandoned adobe was small but solid. As Eleanor stepped inside, carrying Samuel, she felt something she hadn't experienced in over a year, the possibility of permanence. Not the gilded cage of her Boston life, but a true home built on their own terms. Within a week, Joseph had repaired the roof and reinforced the walls. Eleanor planted a garden with seeds shared by neighbor women who asked few questions but offered practical help. Samuel, now crawling with determined speed, explored every corner of their new domain. Their nearest neighbor was Esperanza Chen, daughter of a Chinese railroad worker and a Mexican seamstress. Her husband, Robert Clearwater, was half Lakota, half Irish. Their children played with the unconscious ease of those who'd never known a world where their existence was remarkable. "People come here to forget what they can't be elsewhere," Esperanza explained as she helped Eleanor string chilies to dry. "We make our own rules." Life settled into rhythms both familiar and new. Joseph found work breaking horses and hunting for the community. Eleanor took in mending and taught letters to children whose parents wanted them educated but couldn't send them to towns where their mixed blood would bar them from schools. Samuel thrived, speaking his first full sentence in a mixture of English, Apache, and Spanish that made perfect sense in Esperanza. He toddled after older children, fearless and laughing, the turquoise amulet for Maria still at his neck. One evening, as Eleanor watched Joseph teaching Samuel to track rabbit prints in their yard, she felt the familiar flutter in her belly, the sensation she'd thought she'd never experience again. She waited, uncertain, but the feeling came again, stronger, unmistakable. "Joseph," she called softly. He looked up, read her face, and was at her side instantly. "What is wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. "Everything's right. I think Samuel will have a sibling." Joseph's eyes widened. For a moment, he simply stared. Then he swept her into his arms, spinning her around while Samuel laughed and clapped, not understanding but delighting in his parents' joy. "See?" Joseph said when he set her down, voice thick with emotion. "Desert magic. You just needed to be free." This pregnancy felt different from the start. Where Samuel had been born from desperation and flight, this child grew in peace. Eleanor's body, strong from physical work and nourished by happiness, carried with ease. The women of Esperanza embraced her condition with practical support. Esperanza Chen shared Chinese herbs for morning sickness. Ana Morales, whose grandfather had been a curandero, taught Eleanor exercises to prepare for birth. Even crusty widow Patterson, one of the few full white residents, knitted tiny blankets. When Eleanor felt the baby quicken strong kicks that made her gasp, she was hanging laundry while Samuel played at her feet. The simple domesticity of the moment overwhelmed her. A year ago, she'd been a desperate woman dying in the desert. Now she was mother to one child and carrying another, her hands rough from honest work, her heart full of love she'd thought herself incapable of feeling. As her pregnancy progressed, news trickled in from the outside world. The Apache wars continued, with increasing violence on both sides. Sometimes, refugees arrived in Esperanza, families torn apart by conflict, seeking the same neutral ground Joseph and Eleanor had found. One such family brought disturbing news. "There's a white man been asking about an Eleanor Whitmore," the father reported. "Offering gold for information. Says she was kidnapped by Apache. Has legal claim on her." Eleanor's blood chilled. "James, still hunting her, even now." "He won't find you here," Miguel assured them. "Esperanza protects its own." But Eleanor saw the worry in Joseph's eyes. That night, as Samuel slept between them, they talked in whispers. "If he comes," Eleanor began. "I kill him," Joseph said flatly. "No." Eleanor gripped his hand. "No blood on our children's home. Promise me." Joseph was silent long enough that she feared he'd refuse. Then, "I promise, but if he tries to take you or our children—" "He won't." Eleanor's voice held steel. "I'm not the woman who ran from Boston. I'll protect what's mine." Her labor began during a thunderstorm, as if the sky echoed her body's work. This time, surrounded by experienced women in her own home, Eleanor felt powerful rather than afraid. Joseph stayed with her, as Apache tradition allowed, his presence anchoring her through the waves of pain. Samuel, now walking steadily, was kept occupied by Esperanza Chen's oldest daughter, but Eleanor heard his voice occasionally. "Mama, baby come." "Yes, little warrior." Joseph told him during a break between contractions. "Your sister comes." Eleanor gasped. "You think it's a girl?" "I dreamed it." Joseph said simply, "She has your spirit, but gentler. Healer, not warrior." As dawn broke, clearing the storm, their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to everyone's eyes. She was perfect, dark hair like her parents, skin the warm tone of desert sand, eyes that would surely darken to her father's black but now were slate gray like storm clouds. "Rebecca," Eleanor whispered, the name coming unbidden. "Rebecca Mooncrow Dog." "Why Rebecca?" Joseph asked, touching his daughter's tiny fist. "It means to bind. She binds us all together, past and future, Apache and white, all the pieces of our family." Samuel was brought in to meet his sister. He stared solemnly at the bundle in Eleanor's arms, then gently patted the baby's head. "Mine," he announced proprietarily, making everyone laugh. As Eleanor recovered, life in Esperanza continued its peaceful rhythm. Rebecca proved an easy baby, content to be carried in the cradleboard while Eleanor worked. Samuel appointed himself her protector, totting after whoever held his sister with suspicious eyes. The seasons turned. Eleanor's garden flourished. Joseph's reputation as a horse trainer spread, bringing legitimate work from surrounding ranches. Their children grew strong and brown under the desert sun, speaking the polyglot language of Esperanza, equally at home in all worlds and none. One quiet evening, Eleanor sat by their door, Rebecca at her breast, watching Joseph teach Samuel to string a child's bow. The thunderstorm that had announced Rebecca's birth had brought unusual rain, and the desert bloomed in response. The air smelled of sage and possibility. "No more prayers," Eleanor murmured to herself, remembering that night by another fire, in another life. Only gratitude. Joseph heard and came to sit beside her, Samuel climbing into his lap. "What are you grateful for?" "Everything," Eleanor said simply. "The pain that brought me to the desert that brought me to you. You who gave me these children I was told I'd never have." She smiled at him. This man who'd saved her in every way a person could be saved. Even James and his cruelty. Without it, I'd never have found my true life. "The stars remember all stories," Joseph said, repeating his old teaching. "Our story is a good one." "It's not finished yet," Eleanor pointed out. "No," Joseph agreed, pulling his family close. "Best chapters still to come." Samuel had fallen asleep against his father's chest, one small hand protectively on his sister's blanket. Rebecca finished nursing and gazed up at the emerging stars with unfocused wonder. Eleanor leaned into Joseph's strength, feeling the solid reality of the life they'd built against all odds. Somewhere out there, the world continued its conflicts. The Apache fought for their land. The government pressed its advantages, and men like James Whitmore nursed their grievances. But here in Esperanza, in this moment, a family that shouldn't exist by any society's rules sat whole and content. Proof that love could conquer every barrier humans built. The stars emerged fully, ancient witnesses to all the stories below. And in a small adobe house at the edge of civilization, Eleanor Whitmore, who had become Dawn Singer, who had become simply herself, held her impossible children and knew that sometimes the greatest victories came not from fighting the world, but from finding the courage to create your own. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Samuel would grow into a man navigating between worlds. Rebecca would face the particular trials of a mixed-blood woman. There would be joys and sorrows, arrivals and departures, the whole tapestry of life. But tonight, they were together. Tonight, they were home. And that was miracle enough for any lifetime. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you enjoying this tale from? I'd love to hear from listeners around the world. Please subscribe to Wild West Campfire and share your thoughts about Eleanor and Joseph's journey in the comments below. Your stories and reactions make our campfire community special.